Gunshot residues, their location and examination. Gunshot residues are also called powder residues, firearm residues, or GSR. These residues are produced when a gun is fired and they get spread over the crime scene. They can be located at different places at the crime scene, on the clothes of the victim, as well as on the hands, arms, and other parts of the exposed body on the shooter. Since these play a very important role, they have to be analyzed, and method used are both chemical methods as well as instrumental methods. Chemical methods are used for Walker test for detecting nitrite, Harrison and Gilroy's test for detecting nitrates, but instrumental methods are playing a very important role because of the smallness of the amount of these GSRs. These GSR are present in very small quantities, as small as parts per million or even smaller, and thus very important modern developed instrumental methods are necessary, which can be used for examination qualitatively and quantitatively for their detection. The methods are: number one, neutron activation analysis, X-ray fluorescence, SEMEDX, atomic absorption spectrophotometry, and several others. These are located at different places. In addition to what I have already said, they may be found on the inside and outside of the firearm, as well as on the inside and outside of the cartridge cases also.
Dear students, after studying this module, you shall be able to understand the concept of gunshot residue broadly, and you will come to know about its various components and different methods of collection. Along with it, you will learn and understand its importance in providing leads in investigative trials. Let me give you a brief introduction about gunshot residue first. Firstly comes mechanism of formation of gunshot residue. Gunshot residue, also referred to as cartridge case discharge residue or firearm discharge residue. These are unburned or partially burned particles, gases, non-volatile substances coming from primer, propellant, bullet, and firearm. These are visible and invisible depending on various factors. Their location, testing, and identification plays a very important part in the investigative trials, while absence of GSR can also give significant information. Now let me tell you areas of GSR deposition. GSR may be looked for on the hand, mainly present on thumb, trigger finger, and web of hand. On the clothes of the victim if the human being is the target. Intermediate targets may also have GSR depositions. Inside of cartridge cases and barrel may have GSR. In addition, outside surface of barrel can also be examined for gunshot residue. Along with it, fired projectiles may also be examined for gunshot residue. The presence of gunshot residue at the expected region of hands, arms, face, and clothes of the suspect also helps to ascertain whether he or she had actually fired the projectile or not. The firing of a weapon not only propels residue towards the target but also blows gunpowder and primer residue towards the shooter. Deposits of gunshot residue are also found on the web region of the hand. Now let us discuss about production of gunshot residue depending on distant range and contact range. In the case of distant range firing, there will be no GSR like blackening, scorching, and tattooing, as well as metallic chips around the hole of entrance. All of them will not appear and remain absent. However, during the passage of a bullet through the rifled barrel and through a defective, roughened, or country made weapons, which are also termed as improvised weapons, small fragments of metal are cut and propelled in the direction in which projectiles are ejected. In view of the fact that these particles are heavier than the powder grains, they travel longer distance beyond the maximum distance to which powder grains are ejected. Similarly, some gray color or tiny metallic particles which had been cut during their traveling through roughened bores or rifled weapons may appear on the edges of entry holes, which would be circular in case of normal shot and oval in case of angular shot. The trace element analysis will reveal the true position. It may be noted that a contusion ring be partially or completely obscured by a ring of dirt is formed. Lubricants, dirt, dust, and metal shavings lead to the formation of ring of dust. Now let us see how production of GSR is based on close range. While a weapon is fired and the muzzle end is expected to touch the target, it is termed contact range. When the contact is tight and pressing the surface of a target uniformly and close, the skin surrounding the perforation is not tattooed or blackened with embedded powder grains, as in a case of close range shot, indicating absence of gunshot residue. But this may not happen always. Occasionally, some burned and unburned powder grains may get deposited on the skin in and around the margins of entrance wound. It is just possible that the weapon may be lifted on one side due to manufacturing defect in country made weapon or due to careless handling by the shooter or efforts made by victim to escape an attack resulting in losing of light contact giving rise to escape or burn and unburned powder grain and their deposition on the skin. In a tight and proper contact, all the GSR as well as ammunition would be driven into track made by the ammunition through the entrance hole. The imprint of the muzzle end may be evident around the entrance wound in case of pressed shots but not appearance of gunshot residue could be seen. The tissue around the bullet track will appear as a bright red color due to its reaction with carbon monoxide, which is a product of combustion. Contact shot over the forehead or that region of the body where the bone is thick would be marked by appearance of a large irregular and stellate or elliptical shape formation of gunshot residue produced by the force of expanding gases between the skin and the tissue. From the aforesaid discussion about the gunshot residue produced during firing are available as follows. In case A, in close range firing, dust ring, burning, blackening, and tattooing appears as gunshot residue on the target as shown in the figure. The burning of skin is accompanied in by the track due to its reaction with carbon monoxide, which is also a product of combustion. Case B, in distant range firing, no powder pattern is available, but tiny metallic particles which have been cut during traveling through the barrel appears on the edges of entry wound on the target. The ring of dust caused as a result of firing consists of lubricants, dirt, dust, and metallic particles appears on the target with gunshot residue. Occasionally, gunshot residue may be found on entry wound of contact firing when contact is not tight, giving vent to gases. In case of contact firing, it is the entry which has projectiles and other gunshot residue in the track of the hole in addition to the above mentioned locations. Gunshot residue can be located at the following places or articles. Article around the target or around the shooter or both, depending upon the nature of firing, may contain gunshot residue. Clothes and other garments of the victim which act like intermediate targets may have gunshot residue on them. The gunshot residue particles are dispersed in the air. Being light particles, they continue in the air for a long time. They may be transferred to a surface which comes in contact with air or surface which already has gunshot residue. Intermediate targets other than cloths may also have gunshot residue when a projectile hits a glass window pane or a wooden door. The holes created by a bullet in a glass pane or wooden door would carry specially the gunshot residue, load particles, and many other depending on the cartridge case and primer. Gunshot residue classification and composition. Composition, classification, production, and nature of gunshots residue is very complex, and their composition depends on several factors like composition of propellants and primers, composition of projectiles, composition of barrel, and barrel fouling. Let us see composition of propellants and primers first. Black powder. Black powder is the oldest recorded propellant invented by Chinese around the 10th century. It has the following composition: potassium nitrate, also known as saltpeter, 75%, finely divided particles of charcoal, 15%, sulfur, 10%. Saltpeter furnishes the oxygen while the charcoal and sulfur are the fuels. Black powder produces a lot of smoke that could easily reveal the position of the shooter. Smokeless powder. Smokeless powder was developed in the late 19th century to replace black powder as a propellant in weapons, as smokeless powder are for more energetic propellant per unit weight. There are two varieties: single base and double base. The basic components of the smokeless powder are nitroglycerin and nitrocellulose, also known as gun cotton. Nitrocellulose is used alone or in combination with nitroglycerin to form smokeless powders. The former is called single base powder and the later double base powder. Cordite and modified cordite are double base powders. Some smokeless powder is an intimate mixture of nitrocellulose, potassium nitrate, charcoal, and sulfur in the approximate ratio of 20:60 is to 12 is to 8. Now let me tell you about primer. In the modern primer, mercury fulminate has been replaced. The type of primer being used now in India has the following composition: lead stiffenate 32 to 42%, antimony sulfide 13 to 17%, barium nitrate 27 to 37%, PETN 4 to 6%, tetracene 3 to 5%, and aluminium 6 to 8%. Now, inorganic components of smokeless powder. The inorganic material in modern smokeless powders and primers giving rise to gunshot residue can originate from several substances, such as from primers, lead, barium, antimony; from propellants, nitrites, nitrates, and carbon monoxide, a gas produced by propellant and gets absorbed by skin and flesh, turning them to bright red color or cherry red color; from jackets, copper, zinc, and nickel, also in cases where shells are coated with nickel; from barrels, iron from barrels; from bullet, lead; from carbon in propellants, particles of carbon. All these gunshot residue are produced from propellants, primers, bullets, and jackets, and are inorganic in nature. Now let us see organic components of gunshot residue. Nitrocellulose, the unburned or the semi-burned part of the main component of the propellant. Lubricants used for lubricating bullets are organic in nature and appear as gunshot residue. When double base propellants are used, the unburned and semi burned parts of nitroglycerin. Organic materials used as plasticizers are also detected as gunshot residue. Now let us discuss collection of gunshot residue. The gunshot residue can be collected by several methods. Some of them will be briefly described here. Starting with Dry methods of collection of gunshot residue. A cellophane sheet is impregnated with acetic acid. After impregnation, the same is pressed against the side. It will pick up bad particles. Use of adhesive tapes. An inert adhesive tape or an adhesive aluminum tape is pressed against the side bearing the GSR many a times to pick up the desired gunshot residue, which can then be subsequently selected for examination. A solution of cellulose acetate is applied bearing the gunshot residue. When it gets dried up, it may be peeled off and the gunshot residues will be picked up by the cast. The side bearing the powder marks is sprayed with a colloidal solution. The film is reinforced with nylon fibers. The reformed film that picks up the gunshot residue is peeled off on drying. The residues in the barrel are collected by washing the same with hot distilled water. The washings are tested for constituents of the gunpowder residues. Now, collection of organic residues. The evaluation of the organic component of gunshot residue is gaining importance day by day, and especially in the recent times. Some of the techniques of collection are mentioned briefly. Technique of swabbing. A clean piece of cloth or a filter paper is moistened with an organic solvent, which may be acetone, alcohol, or ether, and the site suspected of containing gunshot residue is swabbed. The swabs are collected and then extracted. Tape lifting technique. An inert tape having 2 to 3 centimeters width is taken and the side is taped to pick up all gunshot residue of organic and inorganic origins. This technique is becoming very popular because of convenience in collection of both organic and inorganic gunshot residue as well being economical and can be carried out quickly. The last one would be vacuum lifting technique. This technique is especially suitable for collecting of gunshot residue from cloth. The material deposited on the filter dust is extracted with a suitable solvent for further processing. Sometimes the lack of color contrast between the powder and the garment or presence of heavily encrusted deposits of blood can obscure the visual detection of gunpowder. Often as infrared photographs of suspect area on the garment overcomes such the problem. Dear students, now let us summarize this chapter. In this chapter, I have told you that gunshot residues or GSR are also known as firearm discharge residues. The location, testing and identification of GSR play a very important role in the investigative trials, while its absence also give significant information. GSR particles detection helps in the bullet holes identification, and the GSR particle dispersion patterns help in estimation of range of fire. Black powder is the oldest recorded propellant invented by Chinese around the 20th century. There are two varieties of smokeless powders, single base and double base. We have also come to know that the basic component of the smokeless powder are nitroglycerine and nitrocellulose. The presence of gunshot residue at the expected region of hands, arms, and face and clothes of the suspect also helps to ascertain whether he or she had actually fired the projectile or not. And we have learned in this chapter that in the case of distant range firing, there will be no gunshot residue like blackening, scorching, and tattooing, as well as metallic chips around the hole of entrance. All of them will not appear and remain absent. The gunshot residue can be collected by several methods, like dry methods of collection of gunshot residue using the adhesive tapes, and the last one, for collection of organic residues, we use swabbing, tape lifting, and vacuum lifting techniques, etc.